The night Jacob Mercer walked away from his job, the city lights of Chicago flickered against the rain like a warning he refused to read. He stood outside the towering glass building where he had given 7 years of his life, his resignation letter folded in his trembling hand, and felt both terrified and strangely free. His phone buzzed with missed calls from work, but he silenced it. He had already made the hardest decision of his life. What he didn't know was that before the week was over, his CEO would be standing at his front door with an offer that would change everything. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of single parents, take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest blessings. Jacob was 34, a single father raising his 8-year-old son Noah in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the north side of Chicago. His days began before sunrise and ended long after midnight. He worked as a senior project manager at a fast-growing tech company, reporting directly to the CEO, Victoria Hale. She was brilliant, relentless, and known throughout the company for expecting nothing less than perfection. Investors admired her, employees feared her, Jacob respected her, but he also felt the crushing weight of her expectations. For years, he had balanced conference calls with bedtime stories, deadlines with school recitals. He had mastered the art of muting himself during virtual meetings to remind Noah to brush his teeth. He had typed proposals with one hand while packing lunches with the other. But as the company expanded, so did the demands. Late-night emails became midnight emergencies. Weekend strategy sessions became mandatory. The unspoken rule was clear: the company came first. Noah never complained, but Jacob saw the disappointment in his son's eyes the night he missed his 3rd school performance in a row. He had promised he would be there. He had even circled the date on the calendar. But a last-minute crisis with a major client pulled him into a 3-hour meeting. When he finally reached the school auditorium, the lights were already off. He found Noah sitting alone on the steps outside, clutching a handmade paper crown from the play. The sight broke something inside him. That night, Jacob lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady hum of traffic outside. He thought about the promises he had made to his late wife Hannah in the hospital room where she had taken her final breath 3 years earlier. He had promised her that Noah would always feel loved, protected, and never second to anything else. Somewhere along the way, work had started to overshadow that promise. The next morning, after dropping Noah at school, Jacob drove to the office with a knot in his stomach. The building loomed over him like a monument to everything he had achieved and everything it had cost him. He typed his resignation letter slowly, each word feeling like a step off a cliff. He thanked the company for the opportunity, expressed pride in the projects he had led, and stated that he needed to prioritize his family. When he handed the letter to Human Resources, his hands were steady, but his heart pounded like thunder. Word spread quickly. Colleagues stared in disbelief. Some whispered that he was making a mistake. Others quietly admired his courage. Victoria was out of town meeting investors in New York, and Jacob left before she returned. He packed his belongings into a small cardboard box, took one last look at his desk, and walked away. The first few days felt almost peaceful. Jacob picked Noah up from school every afternoon. They cooked dinner together, laughing as they burned their first attempt at homemade pizza. They watched movies on the couch, the kind of simple moments Jacob had been missing for years. For the first time in a long while, he felt present. But peace has a way of revealing hidden fears. Bills began to pile up on the kitchen counter. Savings that once seemed substantial now looked frighteningly small. Job listings flooded his inbox, each one demanding even longer hours than his previous role. At night, after Noah fell asleep, Jacob sat at the dining table staring at spreadsheets, calculating how long they could survive without a steady income. The numbers were unforgiving. A week after his resignation, as a cold wind swept through the city, there was a knock at his door. Jacob assumed it was a neighbor or a delivery driver. He opened it casually, unprepared for the sight before him. Victoria Hale stood in the hallway, her tailored coat dusted with snow, her expression unreadable. She looked different outside the polished walls of the office. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, and the sharp confidence she carried in boardrooms seemed softened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway felt too small for the tension between them. Jacob's first instinct was embarrassment. He imagined she had come to convince him he had made a reckless mistake. Perhaps she would remind him of the projects he was abandoning, the team depending on him. But Victoria's gaze shifted past him, landing on a crayon drawing taped to the wall behind him. It was a picture of Jacob and Noah holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. She stepped inside at his silent invitation. The apartment was tidy but humble. Toys were neatly stacked in a corner. A stack of unpaid bills rested on the table. Victoria took it all in without judgment. She explained that when she returned from New York and learned of his resignation, she had been furious, not at him, but at herself. She had built a company that prided itself on innovation and loyalty, yet she had failed to see the strain on one of her most dedicated employees. She admitted she had read his exit interview 3 times. The line about choosing his son over everything else had stayed with her. Victoria had grown up watching her own father work himself into exhaustion, missing birthdays and anniversaries in pursuit of success. She had sworn she would build something extraordinary, but she had never questioned what it was costing the people around her. Jacob's departure had forced her to confront that truth. Then she made her offer. She wanted him back, not as the same overworked project manager, but as the head of a new division focused on remote operations and employee well-being. He would design policies that allowed parents and caregivers to thrive without sacrificing their families. Flexible schedules, hybrid teams, real boundaries. She wanted to change the culture, and she needed someone who understood the stakes. The offer came with a higher salary, stock options, and the autonomy to build the department from the ground up. It was more than a job. It was a chance to reshape the very system that had driven him away. Jacob felt the room spin. Part of him wanted to say yes immediately. The financial relief alone would solve the fears keeping him awake at night. But another part of him hesitated. He had just reclaimed his time with Noah. Could he trust that this new role would be different? Victoria didn't rush him. She acknowledged his doubts and promised accountability. She was prepared to present the plan to the board and publicly commit to the changes. This wasn't about optics. It was about survival in a world where burnout was destroying talent. That evening, after Victoria left, Jacob sat beside Noah on the couch. He watched his son concentrate on building a small tower of blocks, tongue peeking out in focus. Jacob imagined a future where he could attend every school play, where he could work with purpose without losing himself. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the blinds, Jacob called Victoria and accepted the offer, but on one condition. If the company ever drifted back to its old ways, he would walk away without hesitation. She agreed. Months later, the changes began to ripple through the organization. Parents attended meetings without apologizing for background noise. Employees logged off at reasonable hours. Productivity rose, but more importantly, morale soared. Investors initially questioned the shift, but profits told a compelling story. One afternoon, Jacob sat in the front row of Noah's school auditorium as his son took the stage wearing another handmade crown. This time, when the applause filled the room, Jacob was there, clapping louder than anyone. Noah's eyes found his in the crowd, and the smile that spread across his face was worth more than any bonus. Victoria, true to her word, continued to champion the new culture. She often said that the bravest decision she had ever witnessed wasn't a bold acquisition or risky investment. It was a single father choosing his child over a prestigious career. Before this story comes to an end, I want to ask you something from the heart. If this journey moved you even a little, if you've ever faced a choice between ambition and love, take a moment to engage with this video. Like it, share your thoughts in the comments, and send it to someone who needs to hear that it's okay to choose family. And right now, before the ending, comment the words family first if you believe no success is greater than being there for the people who need you most. Jacob's life didn't become perfect overnight. There were still challenges, deadlines, and difficult days, but there was balance. There was intention. There was the quiet confidence that he had not sacrificed his son's childhood for a title. Sometimes the most shocking offer isn't about money or power. Sometimes it's about being seen. Jacob had quit to save his family. In doing so, he had unknowingly sparked a transformation that saved countless others from making the same painful choice. And on a quiet evening in Chicago, as father and son watched the sunset from their small apartment balcony, Jacob realized that walking away had been the first step toward building something far greater than a career. It had been the first step toward a life where love and ambition no longer stood on opposite sides of the door.